My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old. The daughter who left. The one they don't talk about unless someone's whispering. I stand outside St. Mark's Episcopal Church in my pressed Army National Guard dress uniform. The fabric doesn't wrinkle, neither do I. Not anymore. The October wind cuts through downtown Millbrook like it's searching for something it lost 15 years ago. Maybe it's looking for the girl who used to live here, the one who believed family meant something. My father's casket sits behind those oak doors, draped in an American flag. Dr. Richard Carter, beloved physician pillar of the community. The man who taught me to tie my shoes and let me disappear. Emily. The voice slices through the murmur of arriving mourners. I don't turn around. I know that tone. Sharp as surgical steel, twice as cold. Emily Carter, don't you dare. My mother appears in my peripheral vision like a storm cloud in a Chanel suit. Margaret Carter moves with the precision of someone who spent 64 years controlling every room she enters. Her heels click against the sidewalk in military rhythm. The irony isn't lost on me. Take that uniform off. Her voice carries that particular whisper yell she perfected when I was 12. Loud enough for the Hendersons and the Patels to hear, quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Do not wear that uniform to your father's funeral. I adjust my service cap. The brim casts a shadow across my eyes. Do you want to shame this family again? Mrs. Henderson stops mid-step. Dr. Patel's wife touches his arm. The words hang in the air like smoke from a house fire, visible to everyone, toxic to breathe. I don't respond. Words are what got me erased the first time. Instead, I walk toward the church entrance. My dress shoes regulation black mirror shine, click against the stone steps. Each step echoes like a countdown. The heavy doors swing open. The sanctuary fills with the rustle of programs and shifting bodies. 200 people turn to look at me. Some faces I recognize. Others have aged beyond memory. All of them know the story they've been told. I walk down the center aisle. My father's casket waits at the altar, surrounded by lilies and lies. The flag draped across the mahogany catches the light from the stained glass windows. Red, white, and blue, the colors I've served. The colors he served in Korea before I was born, before silence became his second language. I stop 3 feet from the casket. The church holds its breath. I bring my right hand to my forehead in a crisp salute. The gesture cuts through the sanctuary like a blade through fabric. Sharp, clean, final. Behind me, someone gasps. Margaret's heels click faster against the marble floor, but she's too late. The salute holds for exactly 3 seconds. Military precision. I reach into my jacket pocket and withdraw a sealed white envelope. The paper feels heavier than it should. 15 years of weight condensed into 24 ounces. Father Mitchell stands at the altar, his kind eyes confused behind wire-rimmed glasses. He's aged since I last saw him. Silver hair, deeper lines around his eyes. He married my parents 42 years ago. Baptized all 3 Carter children. Buried my grandmother. He's never buried a relationship before. I walk up the 3 steps to the altar and extend the envelope toward him. This is from my father. He asked that you read it if I came today. Father Mitchell takes the envelope with careful hands. His fingers tremble slightly as he breaks the seal. The paper crinkles in the silence. I watch his face as he reads. The confusion melts into surprise, then something deeper. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. He looks up at me, then at the congregation, then back at the letter in his hands. Dear God, he whispers. The sanctuary buzzes with whispers. Margaret's voice rises above the rest. What does it say? What did Chief Father Mitchell raises his hand? The room falls silent. He clears his throat and speaks with the authority of someone who's delivered news of births and deaths for 30 years. Silence. She will speak now. The words hit the congregation like a physical force. Gasps ripple through the pews. Someone drops a program. Margaret Carter, who has controlled every narrative in this town for 4 decades, goes pale as communion wafer. I served my country, but in this family that's not the kind of service that counted. Until today. The silence stretches like a held breath. 200 faces stare at me waiting. But I'm not in this sanctuary anymore. I'm 8 years old again, standing in our kitchen while Margaret arranges my brothers like chess pieces. Daniel, you'll introduce the guest speaker at Rotary next week. Your voice carries better than Michael's. She adjusts Daniel's collar with surgical precision. Michael, you'll sit with the Johnsons during service. Their daughter is applying to Princeton. Make connections. I stand by the refrigerator invisible, the youngest of 3 Carter children, the only girl, the afterthought. Margaret Carter ran our house like a political campaign. Every dinner party, every church appearance, every casual conversation was an opportunity to polish the family brand. The Carters didn't just live in Millbrook, we were Millbrook. At least that's how she saw it. My father sat at the breakfast table, reading medical journals, coffee growing cold in his cup. Dr. Richard Carter, respected physician, beloved community figure. He smiled when his patients talked about their grandchildren. He listened when his colleagues shared their troubles. But at home, he existed in the spaces between Margaret's words. Emily, stand up straight. People are watching, always judging, always finding us wanting. I learned early that my strengths didn't translate in the Carter household. While Daniel excelled at debate team and Michael mastered the piano, I dissected frogs in the garage and memorized the periodic table. Science made sense. Elements had predictable behaviors. Reactions followed rules. Families apparently did not. Why can't you be more like the Morrison girl, Margaret would ask, while braiding my hair too tight. She helps her mother with the church bazaar, instead of hiding in her room with those horrible books. Those horrible books were medical textbooks I'd borrowed from my father's office. Gray's Anatomy felt like a treasure map. Each page revealed how hearts actually worked, how lungs filled with air, how bones healed from breaks. I wanted to understand the mechanics of being human. Margaret wanted me to understand the mechanics of being proper. A lady doesn't need to know why things work, she'd say, closing my textbooks during dinner. She needs to know how to make things work for others. My father would glance up from his meatloaf, offer a weak smile, then return to cutting his food into perfect squares. He never disagreed with her. He never agreed either. He simply existed in the neutral space between her expectations and my reality. The worst part wasn't the criticism, it was the way my achievements got reframed. When I placed first in the regional science fair, Margaret told the neighbors I was academically inclined but socially challenged. When I volunteered at the animal shelter, she mentioned how Emily prefers animals to people, bless her heart. When I got accepted to the state youth leadership program, she sighed and said, I suppose someone has to be difficult in every family. Difficult. That became my label, the difficult Carter child. The memory that cuts deepest happened during my junior year of high school. I'd been working toward it for months, a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins summer pre-med program. 3 weeks in Baltimore learning from real doctors, shadowing in real hospitals. I found the acceptance letter on a Tuesday. My hands shook as I read it twice, then 3 times, making sure the words were real. Emily Carter, full scholarship. Congratulations. I ran into the kitchen where Margaret was arranging flowers for her book club meeting. Mom, I got in. The Hopkins program. They're paying for everything. She didn't look up from her chrysanthemums. No. The word hit like a door slamming. But it's Johns Hopkins. It's the best program in the country. They only accept 20 students. No daughter of mine is moving away to dissect cadavers. She snipped a stem with more force than necessary. What would people think a 17-year-old girl alone in Baltimore doing God knows what with dead bodies? It's medicine, Mom. It's what I want to do with my life. What you want. She finally looked at me, her eyes cold as January. Emily, women in this family support. We don't lead. We don't go off chasing dreams that make everyone uncomfortable. We stay close to home and we help our families succeed. My father chose that moment to walk through the kitchen. He'd heard everything our house carried sound like a church carries prayers. Richard. Margaret said not quite a question. He paused by the coffee maker, his back to both of us. The program sounds impressive, he said quietly. My heart jumped. Then he poured his coffee and walked away. That night, I wrote the decline letter myself. Margaret watched me seal the envelope. The message was clear. Carter women existed to make other people shine. We were the foundation, not the building. We were the frame, not the picture. 20 years later, standing in this sanctuary, I finally understand what she was really afraid of. She wasn't afraid I'd fail. She was afraid I'd succeed. The congregation shifts in their seats, programs rustling like autumn leaves. But I'm not here anymore. I'm 23 again, walking into my father's clinic on a humid June morning, my nursing degree still warm from the graduation ceremony. 4 years away at State University had changed me. I'd learned to suture wounds and start IVs. I'd held the hands of dying patients and celebrated with new mothers. I'd discovered that healing wasn't just about knowing anatomy. It was about seeing people clearly without the filters of expectation or convenience. Coming home was supposed to be a gift to my father. Summer break before starting my job at Regional Medical Center. 3 months helping at Carter Family Practice, the clinic he'd built from nothing over 30 years. "Emily's back," he'd announced to his nurse, Mrs. Davidson, that first morning. His voice carried pride he rarely showed at home. "She's going to help us catch up on paperwork." The paperwork told stories. Insurance forms revealed which families struggled to pay for medications. Treatment notes showed who came in for checkups when they really needed someone to listen. And the charity fund ledgers, those showed something else entirely. Millbrook Community Health Fund. My mother had managed it for 15 years, collecting donations to help families who couldn't afford medical care. On paper, it looked perfect. Donations and payments out a small administrative fee for Margaret's coordination efforts. But the numbers didn't add up. I spent 3 weeks cross-referencing the fund's records with my father's patient files. Donations marked for the Wilson family's insulin. But the Wilsons had private insurance that covered everything. A grant for Mrs. Peterson's cancer treatments. But Mrs. Peterson had died 2 years before the treatments were supposedly funded. The discrepancies totaled $18,000 over 2 years. I found my father in his office on a Thursday evening reviewing lab results under the green banker's lamp that had sat on his desk since I was a child. "Dad, we need to talk about the charity fund." He didn't look up from the papers. "What about it?" "The numbers don't match. Donations are being allocated to families who didn't receive care or who have insurance that already covered their costs." His pen stopped moving. "I think there might be some bookkeeping errors," I continued. "Or maybe something more serious." He set down his pen and finally looked at me. In that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before in my father's eyes: fear. "Emily, this isn't your concern. Dad, $18,000 is missing. If someone's embezzling, stop." The word came out sharper than I'd ever heard him speak. "Just stop. You don't understand how complicated these things are." But I understood perfectly. The fund was supposed to help people who needed medical care but couldn't afford it. Instead, the money was disappearing into expenses that didn't exist for people who didn't need help. "We have to report this," I said. "We don't have to do anything. You're going to forget what you think you saw, and you're going to focus on your real job." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 12. In nursing school, they taught us about ethical obligations. See something, say something. Patient advocacy didn't end when the shift was over. I made copies of the relevant documents and drove to the county courthouse the next morning. 3 days later, everything changed. The complaint arrived by certified mail on a Monday. Emily Carter was being formally investigated for illegally accessing confidential patient records and violating HIPAA privacy laws. The allegation: I had reviewed patient files without authorization and shared private medical information with outside parties. The story spread through Millbrook like smoke from a grass fire. By Tuesday, everyone knew. By Wednesday, they'd chosen sides. Margaret's version reached every doorstep in town. Emily embarrassed her father. She violated patient trust. She was always too curious for her own good, always thought she knew better than everyone else. Poor Richard having to deal with this humiliation. I tried to explain to anyone who would listen: the fund irregularities, the missing money, the families who were supposed to be helped but never received aid. No one wanted to hear it. "You accessed those files illegally," Mrs. Henderson said when I ran into her at the grocery store. "That's a federal crime, Emily. How could you put your father in that position?" "She's always been difficult." I heard Mrs. Morrison tell someone in the pharmacy line. "Margaret tried so hard with that girl, but some children just turn out wrong." My father remained silent in public. He attended town council meetings where citizens expressed concern about patient privacy at his clinic. He sat through church services where people whispered behind hymnals. He smiled and nodded and said nothing. At home, he spoke only once about the situation. "Just let this die down," he said over dinner, cutting his pot roast into precise squares. "If you fight it, you'll make it worse for all of us." All of us. I stared at him across the table. "Dad, I'm trying to expose fraud. Someone stole money meant for sick families." Emily, Margaret's voice cut like ice. You accessed private medical records without permission. That's the only fact that matters now. But the charity fund is none of your business, my father said quietly. It never was. That night, I sat on my bed surrounded by official letters, legal warnings, and character references I'd never be able to use. My nursing career was over before it started. No hospital would hire someone under federal investigation for privacy violations. The next morning, I drove to the Army recruitment office in the county seat. Sergeant Williams was a kind man with gray temples and steady hands. He didn't ask about my troubles. He didn't care about Millbrook gossip. He offered me a chance to serve something bigger than small-town politics. I enlisted in the Army National Guard on a Tuesday, left town on a Friday. Nobody called to say goodbye. For 15 years, the Carter family pretended I didn't exist. Christmas cards went to Daniel and Michael. Wedding invitations included +1s for my brothers, but not for me. Birth announcements celebrated new grandchildren I'd never meet. I became the daughter who left, the one they don't talk about unless someone's whispering. But some secrets don't stay buried forever. The email arrives on a Wednesday morning while I'm reviewing training schedules at Fort Harrison. 15 years of silence broken by 12 words that land like artillery shells. Your father has passed. Funeral is Saturday. Do not wear your uniform. No signature. Sent from Margaret's personal account, the same address she's used to send Christmas photos of grandchildren I've never met to what she probably thinks is a dead email address. I stare at the screen until the words blur. Dr. Richard Carter, dead. The man who taught me to identify poison ivy and let me disappear without a fight. My hands shake as I close the laptop. Around me, the administrative office continues its normal rhythm. Phones ring, keyboards click. People discuss weekend plans and training rotations. Life moves forward while mine stops completely. I request emergency leave and drive home to my apartment in Columbus. The place is small, clean, efficient. No family photos on the mantle because there's no family to photograph. No wedding ring on the counter because some people are meant to serve, not settle. For 3 days, I debate attending. I rehearse conversations that will never happen. I imagine walking into that church and seeing faces that have aged 15 years without me. I wonder if Daniel still has his confident smile, if Michael still plays piano, if Margaret still controls every narrative. I wonder what my father looked like when he died. If he was alone, if he thought about the daughter who left. Friday evening, I drive to Millbrook. The town hasn't changed much. Same tree-lined streets, same historic courthouse, same church where my family has attended services for 40 years. I park across from St. Mark's and sit in my car as the sun sets behind the steeple. The building looks smaller than I remember, but maybe that's because I've spent 15 years in places where everything is measured by mission requirements rather than memory. The side door opens. An elderly man emerges, moving slowly down the steps with the careful precision of someone whose bones remember better days. I recognize the silver hair, the gentle slope of his shoulders. Deacon Peterson. He's retired now, but he was my Sunday school teacher when I was 10. He taught us about David and Goliath, about standing up for what's right even when you're small. He notices my car, notices me. Recognition crosses his weathered face. I roll down the window as he approaches. Emily Carter. His voice carries the same warmth I remember from childhood. I wondered if you'd come home. I'm not sure I have. He nods like he understands the difference between returning and belonging. Your father. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. He came to see me 2 weeks ago. Said he had something for you. My throat tightens. For me. He was specific about the conditions. Deacon Peterson reaches into his jacket pocket and withdraws a sealed envelope. The paper is cream-colored, expensive. My name is written across the front in my father's careful physician's handwriting. He said, and I quote, "Only if she shows up in uniform." The envelope feels heavier than it should. 15 years of silence condensed into something I can hold. He knew I'd come. He hoped. Deacon Peterson's eyes crinkle at the corners. Richard was a good man who made some difficult choices. Sometimes we protect the wrong things for the right reasons. I take the envelope but don't open it. Not yet. Emily, he says as he turns to leave, your father was proud of your service. He never said so publicly, but he kept newspaper clippings. Every time the National Guard was mentioned, every community service project, every deployment announcement, he kept them all. The words hit harder than I expect. I've spent 15 years believing I was forgotten, erased, written out of the family story, but grief, I'm learning, isn't always about absence. Sometimes it's about silence. Sometimes it's about love that doesn't know how to speak. I drive to the hotel on the edge of town, the kind of place where traveling salesmen stay and divorced fathers take their kids for weekend visits. The room is clean and anonymous, perfect for someone who's been invisible for 15 years. I set the envelope on the nightstand and stare at it until exhaustion wins. Tomorrow I'll wear my dress uniform to my father's funeral. Tomorrow I'll read whatever words he couldn't say while he was alive. Tomorrow I'll find out if 15 years of silence was worth the price we all paid. But tonight I sleep like a soldier, light and ready in case everything changes at dawn. Father Mitchell's hands tremble as he unfolds the letter. The sanctuary holds its breath like a patient waiting for test results. 200 people lean forward in their pews, hungry for whatever truth has been hidden for 15 years. I stand at the altar, my dress uniform pressed to perfection, my hands steady at my sides. Behind me, I can feel Margaret's presence like a storm system moving inland. She's calculating, adjusting, preparing her counterattack. But it's too late for damage control. Father Mitchell clears his throat and begins to read in the voice he uses for scripture, clear, carrying, impossible to ignore. If this letter is being read, I am gone, and I am sorry. The words echo off the vaulted ceiling. Someone in the back pew shifts audibly. To my daughter Emily, I failed you. I failed you as a father, as a physician, and as a man who swore to do no harm. My throat tightens. Even in death, his voice sounds tired. Father Mitchell continues. 15 years ago, my daughter discovered irregularities in the Millbrook Community Health Fund, managed by my wife, Margaret. Emily was right. Money was being diverted, falsified, stolen from families who needed medical care they couldn't afford. A collective intake of breath ripples through the congregation. Mrs. Henderson's hand flies to her throat. Dr. Williams drops his program. Emily was accused of violating patient privacy laws and illegally accessing medical records. This accusation was false. Emily had legitimate access to those files as a member of my medical staff. Her review of the charity fund was thorough, ethical, and correct. Margaret's voice cuts through the reading. This is insane. Richard was sick at the end. Where? Silence. Father Mitchell's authority fills the sanctuary. I will finish this. The silence that follows is absolute. I knew Emily was innocent. I knew Margaret had embezzled $18,000 over 2 years. I knew my daughter was being framed for a crime she didn't commit. And I said nothing. The words land like hammer blows. I watch faces in the congregation transform, confusion melting into shock, then into something harder. Recognition. But it wasn't just Margaret I was trying to protect. Father Mitchell pauses, his eyes finding someone in the congregation. I follow his gaze to the third pew, where my brother Michael sits with his wife and 2 children I've never met. His face has gone white as communion bread. Wait, not Michael, Matthew. The name hits me like ice water. My memory has been calling him Michael for 15 years, but his name is Matthew. Matthew Carter, middle child. Golden boy, the son who could do no wrong. I discovered that some of the embezzled funds were used to cover my son Matthew's gambling debts. Debts accumulated during his senior year at State University. Debts that threatened his graduation, his future, his engagement to Sarah Williams. Matthew's wife Sarah turns to stare at her husband. Their children, maybe 8 and 10 years old, sense the shift in energy, but don't understand why their father looks like he's going to be sick. Margaret came to me after Emily filed her report with the county. She said that if I supported Emily's allegations, she would ensure that Matthew's gambling problems became public knowledge. His debts, his lies, his theft from the charity fund meant to help sick families. The sanctuary is so quiet I can hear the heating system cycling on. She said it would destroy him, end his marriage before it began, ruin his career in banking. She asked me to choose between my children. I close my eyes. The weight of 15 years settles on my shoulders like lead blankets. I chose wrong. Father Mitchell's voice grows stronger, more certain. I allowed Emily to be sacrificed to protect Matthew. I let her leave town in disgrace rather than expose the truth. I chose the son who had broken the law over the daughter who had tried to uphold it. Margaret stands abruptly. Richard was on medication. This is dementia talking. Mrs. Carter, sit down. Father Mitchell's voice brooks no argument. I'm not finished. She remains standing, but her authority is cracking like ice on a spring pond. Emily enlisted in the Army National Guard and served her country with honor. She protected strangers while her own family pretended she didn't exist. For 15 years, I watched her name in the newspaper deployments commendations community service, and I felt nothing but shame. My eyes burn. I blink rapidly, maintaining military bearing, while my father's words strip away 15 years of carefully constructed emotional armor. The truth is, this Emily Carter is the most ethical person in our family. She saw corruption and reported it. She chose principle over comfort. She served others while we served ourselves. Father Mitchell looks directly at me. If Emily is present in uniform, and only if she is present in uniform, I want her to speak. She deserves to tell her side of the story. She deserves to be heard. The letter rustles as he folds it. The sanctuary buzzes with whispers, gasps, the sound of people processing information that reshapes everything they thought they knew. Margaret's voice rises above the murmur. This is a setup. She manipulated a dying man. Ma'am. Father Mitchell's tone carries 30 years of pastoral authority. Your husband was lucid when he wrote this letter. I witnessed his signature. I know his handwriting, and I know his heart. He turns to face the congregation, then looks directly at me. She will speak now. The words hang in the air like incense. 200 faces turn toward me, some shocked, some curious, some calculating how this new information affects their own standing in the community. Matthew slumps in his pew, like a man who's been holding his breath for 15 years and finally has to exhale. Margaret stands frozen, her perfect composure finally cracking. And I stand at the altar in my dress uniform, holding 15 years of silence that's about to break like a dam in spring flood. My father's casket waits behind me, draped in the flag of the country I've served, while my own family served themselves. It's time to speak. I step forward to the podium, where my father delivered countless eulogies for other people's parents. My hands rest on the wooden surface, steady, despite the earthquake happening in my chest. 200 faces stare up at me. Some I recognize from childhood, age now weathered by 15 years of living in a town where secrets have weight. Others are strangers who know my story only through whispered versions, telephone game distortions of events they never witnessed. I clear my throat. The sound echoes in the sanctuary like a gavel calling court to session. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old. I've served in the Army National Guard for 15 years. I've been deployed twice, trained medics in 3 states, and helped coordinate disaster relief after 4 major floods. My voice is steady, military briefing voice, facts first, emotions later. I'm also the daughter who was erased from this family's story, not because I did something wrong, but because I did something right at an inconvenient time. Margaret shifts in her front row seat. She's calculating her next move, but the ground has shifted beneath her feet. 15 years ago, I discovered that $18,000 meant for sick families had been stolen from the Millbrook Community Health Fund. Money donated by people in this room. Money meant to pay for insulin and cancer treatments and antibiotics for children whose parents worked 2 jobs but still couldn't afford health care. Mrs. Henderson's face crumples. She was one of the major donors hosting fundraisers in her backyard every summer. I reported the theft because that's what you do when you see people being harmed. You speak up, you act, you serve something bigger than your own comfort. My voice doesn't shake. Years of military discipline have taught me to deliver difficult truths without flinching. I was accused of crimes I didn't commit. My character was destroyed in coffee shops and church meetings and grocery store checkout lines. You were told I violated patient privacy, that I embarrassed my father, that I was always too difficult for my own good. A few people in the congregation looked down at their programs. Guilt has its own body language. I didn't defend myself because I thought the truth would eventually surface. I thought integrity was like water, it finds its own level. I was 23 years old, and I believed justice was inevitable. I paused, letting that naivety hang in the air. I was wrong. Justice isn't inevitable. It requires witnesses. It requires people willing to speak even when speaking costs them something. My eyes find Matthew in the 3rd pew. He's staring at his hands, shoulders curved inward, like he's trying to disappear into himself. My father chose silence to protect my brother's future. I understand that choice. Parents sacrifice for their children, but his silence sacrificed me instead. The sanctuary is absolutely still. Even the children have stopped rustling. I wore my uniform today, not for your approval. I wore it because he once told me he was proud of me in it, before he stopped saying anything at all. The words catch slightly in my throat. This is the closest I'll come to crying in public. For 15 years, I've served people I've never met. I've pulled injured soldiers from training accidents. I've sandbagged levees during floods. I've distributed supplies to families whose homes were destroyed by tornadoes. I learned that service isn't about recognition. It's about doing what needs to be done, whether anyone notices or not. An elderly man in the back nods slowly. Veterans recognize the language of duty. But service also means telling the truth when lies are more convenient. It means protecting people who can't protect themselves. It means choosing what's right over what's easy. Margaret stands abruptly, her Chanel suit wrinkled from gripping the pew rail. This is a setup. Her voice carries the desperation of someone watching their carefully constructed narrative collapse. She's manipulating all of you with a story no one can verify. I can verify it. The voice comes from the middle of the sanctuary. A thin man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses stands slowly. I recognize him, Mr. Phillips, the accountant who used to do the church's books. Mrs. Carter, I warned you about the fund discrepancies 2 years before Emily ever looked at those records. You told me to stay in my lane, that family business wasn't my concern. Margaret's face cycles through shock, anger, and calculation in rapid succession. That's your misremembering. I kept copies. Mr. Phillips's voice is quiet but firm. I always keep copies when something doesn't add up. Another voice rises from the left side of the sanctuary. She asked me not to mention the Wilson family's insurance coverage, said it would complicate the paperwork. Mrs. Wilson herself standing now, her voice shaky but determined. More murmurs ripple through the congregation. People turning to each other, sharing half-remembered conversations, small inconsistencies they'd noticed but never questioned. Margaret sits down hard, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. I watch the moment when narrative control shifts from one person to an entire room. Truth doesn't always win, but when it does, it moves like wildfire. I didn't come back to destroy anyone, I say, drawing their attention back to the podium. My brother made mistakes when he was young. People do that. People deserve second chances. Matthew looks up at me for the first time since the reading began. His eyes are red-rimmed, grateful. But covering up those mistakes by destroying someone else, that's not protection. That's choosing one child over another. That's choosing comfort over justice. I step back from the podium but don't leave the altar. I didn't come back to disgrace anyone. I came to be seen, for once. The sanctuary fills with the rustle of programs, the creak of wooden pews, the sound of 200 people processing 15 years of assumptions. Margaret Carter sits in the front row, no longer the woman who controlled every narrative in Millbrook. She looks smaller somehow, like a magician whose tricks have been revealed. And I stand in my dress uniform, finally visible after 15 years of erasure, telling my father's truth and my own. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's full of everything that's about to change. The cease and desist letter arrives by courier at my hotel room on Sunday morning. Heavy legal letterhead, Margaret's lawyer's signature words like slander and defamation, scattered through 3 pages of threats. Your inflammatory and false statements at Dr. Richard Carter's funeral service constitute malicious defamation of character, the letter reads. Cease all public commentary regarding the Carter family or face immediate legal action. I set the letter on the hotel room's small table next to my untouched breakfast. Outside, Millbrook continues its Sunday routine, families walking to late service children, riding bicycles on tree-lined streets. The kind of peaceful morning that exists on postcards and in memories. My phone buzzes. A text from a number I don't recognize. This is Daniel, I'm sorry, my older brother. The one who excelled at debate team, who always knew the right thing to say. One word. Sorry. 15 years of silence, and that's what he offers. I don't respond. Some conversations can't be rebuilt with text messages. Another buzz. This one from Matthew's number, but there's no message. Just a notification that he's blocked me. I stare at the screen for a long moment, then delete his contact information. Some bridges burn themselves. By Monday morning, my phone starts ringing with numbers I don't recognize. Local media, regional newspapers, someone from a true crime podcast who heard about the funeral speech that exposed family corruption. I let them all go to voicemail. The Millbrook Gazette runs the story on Tuesday. Local Families Charity Fund under investigation following funeral revelation. The article is careful factual using phrases like allegations and under review. But the damage is done. In a town of 8,000 people, everyone reads the local paper. Wednesday brings the real earthquake. The church board announces a formal investigation into the Millbrook Community Health Fund. Father Mitchell releases a statement. St. Mark's Episcopal Church takes seriously all allegations of financial impropriety involving funds managed under our auspices. We will cooperate fully with all investigations. I read the announcement in my hotel room, still in my civilian clothes, still technically on emergency leave. My unit commander called yesterday to check on me, not because of the media attention, but because good soldiers take care of each other. Take the time you need, Carter, Colonel Hayes said. But remember, this doesn't define your service. You've been solid for 15 years. Don't let civilian drama change that. Civilian drama, that's what 15 years of erasure looks like from the outside. Thursday, the regional newspaper picks up the story. Small-town charity scandal exposed at funeral. They interview Mr. Phillips, the accountant who kept copies. They quote Mrs. Wilson, who confirms her family's insurance covered treatments the fund supposedly paid for. They try to interview Margaret. Her lawyer issues a statement. Mrs. Carter is grieving the loss of her husband and will not be commenting on these baseless allegations during this difficult time. Baseless allegations. The phrase tastes like ash in my mouth. Friday brings a knock on my hotel room door. I open it to find a young woman with a press badge and a digital recorder. Ms. Carter, I'm Jessica Martinez from Channel 8 News. Could I ask you a few questions about your experience with the charity fund? No comment. Just a few questions about what it's like to be vindicated after 15 years. No comment. I close the door and turn the deadbolt. Vindication isn't the right word. Vindication implies I was seeking revenge, that this was about proving I was right. But I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to exist. My phone buzzes with a text from Deacon Peterson. The fund investigation has expanded. County prosecutor is involved now. Thought you should know. I type back, thank you. He responds immediately, your father would be proud. I stare at those words until they blur. Proud, past tense. Too late to matter, but somehow still necessary to hear. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the funeral, I check out of the hotel and drive back to Columbus. In my rearview mirror, Millbrook shrinks to postcard-sized church steeples and tree-lined streets, and the weight of 15 years lifting off my shoulders like morning fog. The media calls continue for another week. Producers wanting to book me on talk shows. Journalists seeking exclusive interviews. A documentary filmmaker interested in family secrets and small-town corruption. I declined them all. They tried to rewrite the story. Margaret's lawyers spinning it as family drama. Local gossips turning it into entertainment. Media outlets hunting for the most dramatic angle. But when the truth speaks clearly, you don't need to shout it again. The prosecutor's investigation will take months. The church board will issue reports. The newspaper will follow up with updates and analysis. People will have opinions about who was right and who was wrong, and whether any of it matters 15 years later. None of that is my responsibility anymore. I've done what I came to do. I spoke my truth. I wore my uniform. I existed in a space that had erased me. The rest belongs to other people now. I drive north toward Columbus, toward my small apartment and my military duties, and the quiet life I've built far from family narratives and small-town secrets. In my rearview mirror, Millbrook disappears completely. But for the first time in 15 years, I'm not the one who's invisible. 3 months later, I drive back to Millbrook on a Tuesday morning when the rest of the world is at work or school. The investigation has concluded. Margaret pled guilty to embezzlement and received 2 years probation plus restitution. Matthew's gambling debts were paid years ago, but his banking career ended quietly. A resignation letter citing personal reasons and a move to another state. The Millbrook Community Health Fund was dissolved. The remaining legitimate donations were transferred to Regional Medical Center's charity care program, where actual accountants and oversight committees ensure the money reaches people who need it. But I'm not here for updates or closure or any of the neat psychological packages people expect at the end of difficult stories. I'm here to visit my father's grave. Millbrook Cemetery sits on a hill overlooking the town, surrounded by oak trees that have watched over the dead for more than a century. I park near the maintenance shed and walk the gravel paths in my dress uniform morning dew, darkening the leather of my regulation shoes. His headstone is simple granite with clean lines. Richard Edward Carter, M.D., beloved husband and father, 1952-2025. No mention of service, though he was a medic in Korea before medical school. No mention of the clinic he built or the thousands of patients he treated over 30 years. Just the basic facts of a life reduced to dates and relationships. The grave is neat, well-tended. Fresh flowers, white lilies stand in a bronze vase, anchored in the earth. Margaret's touch. Even in disgrace, she maintains appearances. I kneel on the grass, feeling the dampness seep through my uniform pants. From my jacket pocket, I withdraw a folded American flag, not the one from his casket, which went to Margaret, but one I purchased myself. A flag that's never draped a coffin or honored a death, but represents something else entirely. I place it carefully on the grave, smoothing the red and white stripes with the same precision I learned folding laundry in basic training. "You didn't speak when I needed you," I whisper to the headstone. "But you gave me the last word. That has to be enough." The morning air carries the scent of cut grass and the distant sound of traffic on Route 9. Somewhere in town, people are starting their day drinking coffee, reading newspapers, discussing weekend plans. Life continuing in the normal rhythms that exist between the dramatic moments. I think about the letter he wrote sitting in his study with his green banker's lamp, knowing he was dying, finally finding the courage to tell the truth, when truth could no longer cost him anything. Too little, too late, but something. "I spent 15 years angry at you," I continue, my voice barely above a whisper. "Angry at your silence, angry at your choice, angry that you let me disappear rather than stand up for what was right." A mourning dove calls from the oak tree above us. The sound echoes across the cemetery like a question. But I understand now, you weren't just protecting Matthew. You were protecting the idea of family, the hope that silence could preserve what speaking would destroy. I stand slowly, brushing grass from my knees. The morning sun has climbed higher, burning off the dew, warming the air with the promise of summer. You were wrong, though. Silence doesn't preserve anything. It just lets the wrong people control the story. I adjust my service cap and look down at his name, carved in granite. Richard Edward Carter. A man who healed bodies but couldn't heal the fractures in his own family. A man who chose peace over justice and spent his last years living with the consequences. "I forgive you," I say finally. Not because you earned it, but because carrying anger for 15 years is like carrying stones in your pockets. Eventually, you have to set them down. The wind picks up, rustling through the oak leaves above us. As I turn to leave, it catches the edge of my uniform jacket, lifting it slightly. The movement causes my service pins to catch the morning sunlight deployment ribbons, commendation medals, the small bits of metal that tell the story of who I became after I left this place. I walk back toward my car, leaving the flag on his grave. Tomorrow, Margaret or the groundskeepers will probably remove it. But today it's there, a symbol of service he couldn't give me in life but somehow managed to honor in death. As I reach the cemetery gate, my phone buzzes with a text from Daniel. "Saw you at the cemetery. Coffee." I type back, "Next time." Some conversations require more preparation than others, but the fact that he's watching, that he's reaching out, suggests that maybe 15 years of silence doesn't have to become 30. I drive through downtown Millbrook one more time before heading north. The courthouse square looks the same as it did when I was 8 years old. The Methodist church bell tower still chimes the hours. Porter's Pharmacy still has the same green awning. But I'm different now. Not the girl who left in disgrace, and not the soldier who came back for revenge. I'm something else entirely, someone who learned that existence doesn't require permission from other people. They erased me for 15 years. I didn't come back to fight. I came back to exist, and I'm still standing. The road stretches north toward Columbus, toward my apartment and my duties, and the quiet life I've built beyond the reach of family narratives. In my rearview mirror, Millbrook grows smaller until it disappears completely behind the hills. But this time, I'm not the one who's invisible. This time, I choose when to leave.